Great. If you have any technical questions, I'd be happy to help you with them in the chat box as this goes on. So today's webinar, as a reminder why we're here, is to talk about communication styles for positive farm apprentices. Polly has many years of hosting apprentices on her farm, and she's going to talk about this experience and more experiences about how to prioritize clear nonviolent communication while working with apprentices and employees on the farm. And please hold any questions that you might have until after the webinar, and we will have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to address all of those.
That's a picture of our farm right there. Picture the landscape.
We wanted to begin just with a land acknowledgement of here we are at Mockville, which is now present day Unity, Maine, but just acknowledging that this land was traditionally the Abenaki as part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. We understand that people are from all over the country that are zooming into this webinar. So if you are interested to find out more information about the land that you are currently on, the native-land.ca link here allows you to search that and learn more specifically about the First Nations people on your land. We're having some feedback from one of the numbers calling in, so if you could just make sure that you're muted, that would be great. A little bit of background about the Maine Organic Farmer and Gardeners Association here in Unity. We've been managing the apprenticeship program here for 45 years now, and every year we have about 50 apprenticeship host farms that are throughout the state, and they vary in scale and forms of production to host apprentices on their farm. And we also run educational programs about every other week through the summer that apprentices attend at varying different farms to learn about different aspects of production. We do have one more webinar in this series coming up, and that is on October 29th. It's specifically going to be around how you can support the growth of beginning farmers on your farm as an employer or a host farm. And we have Julie Sullivan and Lori Payne that will be talking about their experience both as farmers that have hosted apprentices, and also just generally rad people that work with apprenticeship networks. And I'll post the registration link for that in our chat box, and you can also visit the MOFGA website to register for that as well and learn more information about it.
Yeah, I can't recommend Julie's presentation enough. It's really, she has got it down around how to facilitate and help learners be lifetime learners. So really recommend that.
And that will be 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and also runs for an hour. And we'll also be recording that and posting it as well. So at this point, I get the awesome moment to transfer this over to Polly, and I'm going to sneak into the chat box.
Great. Thanks, Mo. So I am going to be talking today really not from a place of authority about communication, but from a place of experience, and it's been a lifelong interest of mine, and I still consider myself very much a lifelong learner in terms of how to communicate, and we're going to talk about the various, some various levels of communication. So, and we're also going to talk about some skills and how to turn those skills into practices or patterns of communication, and then also how to systematize communications. Because what I've learned in the last 20 years of owning and running our farm is that I really consider communication a critical farming skill, not only to personal happiness and well-being, stress management, but also just to success, financial success, production success, and relational success, if there's such a thing, between people that you interact with as a farmer as a community member, as a family member. So we're going to talk about the system, my belief of how it should be, how communication skills and practices should be systematized later. But that's my little opinion in parentheses there. We communicate as farmers with a lot of people in our world and in our days and in our lives. Some of us have partners, farming partners, who might be family members, who might be just business partners. We certainly all have customers as farmers who are selling our wares out in the world. Perhaps they're CSA customers, perhaps they're neighbors, perhaps they're wholesale customers, perhaps you never see them. But you, by definition, you need to communicate with all of your customers. We also have I put this in there, we also communicate either directly or indirectly with our competitors. And we communicate through our prices, we communicate through our social media posts and information that we share. We communicate with our competitors at farmers markets and with our body language and our welcoming or non-welcoming communications and conversations with our competitors. So I add those in as a place that we all need to be thinking about how we communicate. Some of us have life partners, love partners. Some of us might be married. So we need to have communications with the people that we live with in our family, in our homes, or in our love relationships. So, and then of course, what we're here to talk about today is that we all have employees, and I use the word employees and apprentices sort of interchangeably. I know this is particularly about apprenticeships, but we have hosted, gosh, I don't know how many, probably 20 or 25 different apprentices over the years on our farm. And we also have had many employees. And I think everyone, I won't go into my definition between the two. I think you know the difference. But, okay, just trying to figure out the advancing thing. So on our farm, you know, some people call this a holistic management goal or a holistic vision. When my partner apprentice and I talk about what are we trying to do each year, we think about things like this that I imagine we all might have in common. If we're all sitting in the same room together, we all might agree that we all want to grow great food, we want to make a living, we want to improve soils, we want to build our businesses to be really sturdy and resilient, we want to have good relationships. That's really important for us. So, and we want to be professionals, and we want to challenge ourselves. So I can imagine that, and of course, we want to have some fun. So we, you know, this is kind of our set of goals, really simple goals. And communication has everything to do with each one of these. And good communication and clear communication will really ease and grease all of those goals to make them more attainable. This is a picture of 4 apprentices and myself. I'm in the white overalls, and my partner apprentice there in the maroon sweatshirt. And this is the last day of our season. You can see there's, I think, ice on the ground and the roots washer in the background. And we've just finished up. You can tell it's evening. And we've just finished up washing the last of the carrots. And this is a great moment because we realized not only did we come to really love each of these 4 people, but we just worked really hard all season long to communicate really well. And this picture kind of encapsulates what we strive for, is a lot of connection, smiling faces, and what we call on our farm the joyful hustle bustle, which sort of encapsulates how to work well and quickly and joyfully. So just a little picture break there. So communication, I like to think of it really as sort of like a toolbox. Some people say, you know, there are a lot of skills or tools that you can put in your communication toolbox. So we're going to go over some of those skills today. And then there's also a component of communication that's about repetition and making a plan. and being willing to revisit and reuse and retry some of those skills. So when you combine skills with repetition, you get a system. And if you remember my first slide, I really believe that communication systems should and can be systematized, just like you know exactly how your irrigation system works. What are the components of it? Who are your support people? Where do you source your materials? How do you troubleshoot? You also know how to practice your irrigation system. You know where the lines get laid. You know how to troubleshoot and clean out the lines. You know what maintenance has to be done in the springtime and how to close it up in the fall time. And I would argue that communication systems can also include such component parts, if you will. You can gather a bunch of tools and people who are your support systems, your support people, and you can gather a lot of practices or patterns, and you can start to teach yourself these patterns and incorporate them into your businesses. And I can really attest to the fact that as these communication systems start to take shape in your business, you will experience a lot more clarity in your business and efficiency for sure. And I think also joy and fun and ease, less stress. So, so communication systems on our farm, this is just sort of a laundry list of everything that we consider in our communication system. So we have emails and we have phone calls. Those are obvious. And I think we all know that, you know, returning both of those in a timely manner is a real, can really be a benefit, especially to your customers who love to hear back really quickly. We get that feedback a lot from our customers. Just thank you for calling us back. Thank you for emailing us back. And it seems really basic, but I think it's actually a super important communication skill. So we have communications with the people. I'm going to kind of go now into more specific to working with employees and apprentices. We communicate with our potential apprentices and employees before we hire them. So we go back and forth about availability and specifics like that. We might send them an employee manual for them to get to know us and our farm through an employee manual. And I will talk about more about that in a few minutes. And then when we set up a time to interview them and we check their references, that is also a part of our communication system. What is our, what questions do we ask? Are we you know, fair and to every person that we interact with? Do we ask people the same interview questions? Do we check everyone's references? Things like that are all part of your communication system as a employer. And then when you're hiring, there's negotiating conversations, and there's also expectations are shared. That might be through the employee manual. It also might be verbally. So to get really clear about your expectations of people. And again, when we go through the employee manual and what we have in our employee manual, you'll see some of the expectations that we have as just, again, as not as an expert, but just what we have in our manual. So any trainings that you offer to your employees or that you require of your employees are considered part of the communication system. We have a lot of whiteboards and chalkboards and clipboards floating around, and those all consist, those are major components of our communication system, so that our crew knows, you know, which whiteboard to look at if they're done with a task and no one's around. They know which clipboard to go to check off how the orders are progressing through the pack shed. We have meals and parties and celebrations with our apprentices and employees from time to time. And these events constitute really important function of communication. And that function is celebrating and gratitude. So I include that in our communication system as well. We have daily meetings, just sort of meetup meetings. They're not very long. And then we have a longer weekly check-in where we'll look at sort of the arc of the week. So meetings are a very important, obvious communication tool. And then instructions. Instructions are really fascinating to me because over the years I can see how I or my partner or people that manage different elements of our business, how they give instructions. And so this is quite a conversation that we're not really going to get into, but I really think that each person should really think carefully about how they give instructions and experiment with your style and maybe ask for some feedback or for some reflections from people you know. And because some people, I know my style, I tend to give pretty quick instructions and then expect people to come back and talk to me if they have a question. Other people like to give very, very specific instructions. And so it's just knowing your style and also your team's skills. How much do you need to instruct on any given task? Or can you say, this is a lot like this, and so that becomes the instruction. If someone's digging, leeks or digging scallions, you'll need the same pitchfork. You'll need the same, they get washed in the same way, things like that. And then corrections. There are always mistakes made on our farm, on every farm. And what we like to tell people from day one, we actually say this in our interview, is that corrections happen every day on our farm. We are really, really adamant about quality control. And so we have to look at how the cilantro bunches are coming in from the field. Even though one of the managers might be out in the field and looking at the cilantro and gives a sample bunch, they don't always come into the pack shed with the same quality or the same size as we would like. So we talk to all of our employees and apprentices about, that basically we correct every day and it's never personal. That's really important. That's really important, is that we don't ever consider a correction personal. If we need to talk to someone about something personal, that would not be at all considered a correction. That would be just considered a conversation, and that would happen at a very different and more private time. So, but we also do want to know how people would prefer to be corrected, because corrections do happen. People make mistakes, or they don't, understand the project well enough. But corrections need to be made in order for the business to, continue in the way that our quality standards require. So we just make it really sort of non-threatening and matter of fact. And I think, because this can be a hard place in every day, especially if people aren't used to getting corrections or get really uncomfortable with corrections. So it's really good to know, to get to know your crew members and individually, what do they prefer? Do they, one person might really not ever want to be corrected in front of anyone else, and that's really fine. And you can have these conversations and learn, ask, or just observe. So yeah, that's all on corrections. And then when there are disagreements, I don't have a good example right at the top of my head, but if there was a disagreement or a misunderstanding, that something that really needs to be worked out, and a repair needs to be made in the crew, that is a part of our communication system as well. And again, there's a lot of information there. We'll get to some tools and techniques around handling disagreements, or how to express yourself in a kind and open way. And then there are exit interviews, so you can learn how to improve in the future from the people that you've worked with. So that's some, probably not all, of the ways that we communicate with people on our farm. The next slide here is a how. How do we communicate? And I'm going to lay out some skills, and I have these circles on there because I really think that communication is, by definition, a relational activity. And if we are relating with someone else, there is, by definition, two people. And one of those people is us. So I always start this, this conversation really with talking about what are some communication skills that we have with ourselves. Leave everybody else out of it. What are some of the skills that we can incorporate into our days so that we can be in touch with our own needs and skills and propensities and challenges. So one simple activity is learn how to do a body scan. Like if I'm scanning my body right now, I feel a little bit jittery because I'm a little bit nervous, but I feel excited, and you just body scan. Just everyone could do that right now. What's going on? You know, maybe you got a sore shoulder, maybe you're grinding your teeth, or you have a tummy ache. That's just a really good skill, any old time of the day, any day, to incorporate into your skill set. And then self-care activities. Atina Diffley liked to say, what is your unique vitamin? And I like thinking about this. For me, my unique vitamin is being alone every day. So I need to have a little bit of time to just be by myself. And other people really need to exercise. Some people might need to walk their dog or eat a really good breakfast, or, you know, and you all know what your unique vitamin is. But that's a really good thing to bring to your the front of your mind as you get to know who you are as a communicator. So identify your stress patterns and communicate them to those around you. So I like to think about, you know, when do I in the season or in the day feel stress, sort of predictably, right? Some people feel stressed when they're hungry. Some people feel stressed when they're flustered. Some people feel stressed when they're hot. Some people feel stressed in the spring, but not in the fall. Those kind of things. So just again, it's about knowing yourself and being able to identify those patterns in yourself. And then also learning about yourself through other means, counseling, journaling, movement, meditation. Those are all wonderful ways to get to know yourself. Now my slick old little reveal thing, I didn't do that well. So we're gonna get all of them on the right here for this next slide. That's okay. We'll jump down through these. And so the next level of that circle, the concentric circle situation, is the people that you're around every day, before we go to the next circle out being like your employees and your apprentices. So I like to think of it, you know, start with yourself, think about some of the skills that affect your close-in relationships, and then the people that you work with and your employees and apprentices. So if we go down through those skills on the right, those skills that relate to like your business partner or your beloved love partner, some of these skills might help you stay in good contact. So obviously weekly meetings to plan, and those might be family details, those might be farm details. And really important, respectful thing, I think, is to be really well prepared for meetings, and also to keep them concise. We've learned that, or brain research has learned that, you know, people really only pay attention, and here I am talking and talking and talking, but really only pay attention for, I think, about 3 sentences on any new topic. And so, you know, keeping things really concise is just, I think, a respectful way to run a meeting. And then having clear expectations has been very, very important in our business and home life. And one of those might be like tidy boundaries around the workday. when does it start? When does it end for different people in our family unit? And then also division of labor, who's doing what, who's responsible for what. These are all things that really can and should be talked about all winter long, and then sort of tweaked and adjusted and debriefed all through the growing season. But we revisit work hours and division of labor every winter for quite a long time. So I really recommend spending a lot of time with your business partner and or love partners to get that really clear, because that can, of course, build a lot of resentment and other, troublesome patterns if those things are not talked about, or if boundaries are not kept. So the next thing there is a daily check-in to stay on track, so that there's accountability every day. That can be really helpful. We find it really important to reconnect personally pretty often, and to have the memory to ask the other person, how are you doing with whatever fill in the blank last thing they might have been struggling with. So it might have been a broken down tractor, or it might have been a relationship in, personal relationship, but just to have that vocabulary and be following up and remembering the last challenge is just I think a really, it shows that you're paying attention and you care and you want to check back in. And then with your stress partner, with your farm partner or your love partner, you try not to let things build up. This is also really could go with any relationship, but making sure that if you feel a little bit of disturbance or in the system, to just have the courage to bring that up sooner than later. And an opening sentence that I often use is, I have something kind of hard to talk about. It's kind of hard for me. Are you willing to sit down and, check in? And that lets the person that you're talking with know that you, that this isn't easy for you and that you're stepping out of your comfort zone. And I think it really can let everybody relax into just that a little bit of vulnerability. So, and then, something like, can we check in about, say, the division of labor, or the hours in the workday, something that might be bothering you. And the last thing I have down here is using iMessages, speaking feelings and needs. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides in more detail. And this is you can learn a lot online about iMessages. It's really a basic difference between accusing someone, in the example I give, instead of saying, God, that lettuce was so dirty, we can't ship it out like that. Instead, if you add a feeling of concern and a need to that, a feeling and need, it can often really lead to a different outcome. Rather than people feeling attacked or accused or blamed, there's more of a feeling of, oh gosh, there's concern here. And we all want to address concern. So I think, and so that's an example. And again, we will talk more about feelings and needs in a couple of slides. So now we move on. Oh gosh, my little trick didn't work again, but we'll just go down through these. You'll see them all. I'm not going to be revealing them one by one. So these are skills and practices specific to employees and apprentices. So the big one right at the top is clear expectations. And we do that by starting with an employee manual. An employee manual, ours is probably 6 pages or so long. And it has all the details that we need to put in writing and let people know before they show up to work with us. So there are details around hiring, payday, how to log your hours, where to log your hours, that we have a trial period, also what taxes and insurance specifics we need to talk about. We talk about attire and breaks. We talk about timeliness and efficiency. That's a really big one for us. And it kind of goes in that corrections conversation. We talk about efficiency pretty much every day. So we put that right out front for people, that we're always watching the clock and, you know, learning how to improve different jobs and tasks so that we can just grow and grow and grow towards more efficient systems. And then what are our communication expectations with our employees and apprentices? What's our style? And also what mode do we prefer? So when I say mode, it's like, would we love to get texts or emails or in person or notes on our desk or notes on the timesheet, anything like that. Just sort of laying out the boundaries of what mode of communication you expect from and with your employees. Scheduling is something that we go over in our employee manual. Time off, sick days, things like that. We talk about food safety and food safety training. We talk about equipment safety and equipment safety training. Really important if you're using mechanized machinery, or certainly tractors and certainly cars and trucks. We also talk about substances on the farm during the workday, or if we have apprentices living on the farm, we have a substance policy that's on there, and that's you know, for every person to determine on their own. Well, every farmer to determine for their home and their business. And then customer interactions are really important to us. So we actually put something in that employee manual about, you know, just that our customers are very important to us, and that we really expect anyone who's working with us to, you know, use good communication skills when working with customers, being kind, eye contact, following up, leaving notes for one of us if a customer needs something, things like that. And then personal conduct, you know, this might include if you have a harassment policy or inclusion policies. What do you expect of the people who live or work with you on the farm, from as to their personal conduct? And then if they're communal living or eating spaces, what are the expectations around that? How often does it need to be cleaned? How, you know, can you use candles? Can you drink beer? You know, does it have a phone? Things like that. What are the shared spaces and how are they communally managed? So, so that's what we have in our employee manual. And the next point there is learn to be a good listener. And again, this is a lifelong exercise, I think. But a few things that my partner and I have done around listening is sometimes we'll ask for, you know, 10 minutes uninterrupted. And if we might say, I really need to talk for 10 minutes without any interruption, that can be a really good listening exercise. You can also, you know, listen and reflect, use reflexive listening. So when someone says something, sort of reflecting back, so I hear you saying this, that can really train your ear to be a good listener and then be able to synthesize and feed back what that person has said. There are lots of really wonderful and nourishing listening activities if you're interested in that, or you feel like that might not be something you're really naturally good at. I really recommend, you know, engaging in some of those, in some listening activities, because there's not much that feels better, I think, to humans than being really listened to and seen. And so it's a great skill and very underestimated, I think. I like to talk to people about mentorship, and you might reflect on who an important mentor in your life was. I know for me, it was a woman I worked with in high school. She was 10 years older than me, but you know, she really treated me like an adult. I was only 17, and she just liked me, and she was very kind and was a great listener and interested in me. And I really think back and really consider her an excellent mentor. So you might bring someone like that to mind and think about their qualities, how they treated you, how they treated others. And right there you would have a really good playlist for how you might aspire to be an excellent mentor to the young people or the aspiring farmers in your life. So I think mentors can be a great, aspirational tool. So continuing on with other skills for employees to use with employees and on your farm, I think it's really important to ask your employees about what their needs and expectations are too. I really recommend an employee manual, but I also really recommend taking the time to learn about what they would like from the experience, certainly, how they prefer to interact, what their best modes of communication are, what their preferences and likes and loves are. Really, really important to spend that time to get to know the people that are living and working with you. And then learning about your instructional style. That can be, again, a work in progress through a whole life, I think, to be clear, consistent, and concise, and make some steps to improve your instructional style. I'll just leave that at that. Creating a workplace culture that is respectful, collaborative, and fun. This is a goal of ours, I would say, and I think it is a skill to intentionally create a place that is respectful, safe, exciting, challenging, collaborative, fun, and that is, I think, of course, under that, you might say, well, how do I do that? And I think all of these communication skills and many more could be applied, but I think it's nice to have these, have goals in a communication system, and that's certainly one of ours, that we work to create that workplace culture. A specific skill that I mentioned earlier was I statements and /NVC, which stands for nonviolent communication. I think my next slide is that. Yes. Nonviolent communication is there's many books written by Marshall Rosenberg. And nonviolent communication, basically, very basically, there are books written about it, so I hate to even consolidate it in so few words, but there are 4 basic steps in communicating with this nonviolent communication as a framework. And those are making an observation, stating your feelings, and stating your needs, and making a request. So, and an example of that, using that lettuce example I gave earlier, might be I noticed that the lettuce came in really dirty this morning, and I feel really concerned that that's gonna end up in somebody's salad mix. And I really have a need for a different washing system for that lettuce. And this is putting this framework onto a non-personal interaction. But you can use it for very personal interactions, of course, too. I feel sad when I feel sad when I am not consulted about an important decision. I really have a need for collaboration, and I'd like it if we could make sure that both of us were on the same page before we made a major decision or made a major purchase, for example. Might be a way to use NVC, that framework, for a more personal interaction. So I'm going to pop back to that other slide. And I just really recommend that if you are interested in nonviolent communication, there are lots of online resources and book resources and study groups and workshops. That has been a really important piece of my learning over the years. So I really recommend that. A general, what do you call that? We have a, I'm losing my word. We try to make corrections in the moment. So rather than, you know, seeing something that hasn't gone quite right and talking about it a few days from now, my partner and I just try to make that correction or that observation right in the moment. Like, oh, I see that, you know, you're coming back from lunch 10 minutes after, you know, the time that we agreed to. Can you tell me, you know, can you tell me what's going on for you? Rather than letting it go a couple days and you know, that can be a skill for some people. Some people need a couple days to think about it and circle back. But one thing that we try to do is just to kind of say things right in the moment. And it lets us just not have a built up story in our minds. And that leads into the next point, which is the ladder of inference tool. That is a tool you can find online. And I really recommend, it's an excellent tool to share with your crew or to read about yourself. And basically it helps people reflect on our own parts of any difficult interaction or situation. So it basically helps you examine your assumptions. And it's called the ladder of inference because oftentimes we make an observation, but we'll jump way up the ladder to an assumption based on our own experiences or cultural norms, or just there's a whole ladder of possibilities that we can learn from. So that's a great tool to look up. It's very simple. You can find them online, ladder of inference tool. And then I have on there, learn how to make a real apology. And I have real capitalized because I think that a lot of people say an apology in a way that to me feels not very real. And that is like, I'm sorry you feel that way. And that somehow accounts or somehow counts as an apology. And in fact, to me, that feels really bad. I don't ever feel bad for the way I feel, and I don't, you know, there's no apology needed for my feelings, but rather, you know, I really try to use an apology to reflect on my role in that, not sort of a pseudo apology, but really taking responsibility for what happened in that interaction. The example I give is, you know, I'm sorry I lost my temper with you. I really did not need to yell, and I want to do better, and I want to stay calmer. And so you're talking about what happened and what you wish didn't happen. And you're also talking in that apology about in the future, I really hope to. And I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to act like that. So that's my 2 cents about apologies. Being careful that you're giving a real apology based on genuine reflection of your own part in that, in whatever situation is going on. And then the skill to move forward and propose a solution. Sometimes we get, you know, circling and circling and circling, and sometimes it's really a skill to say, okay, let's see if we can, you know, come up with, you know, a way forward. And that is a real skill, to know when to step and lead the way out of what might be a dynamic of going around and round and round. And so, again, very specific to a situation, but being able to propose a solution. And then the skill of revisiting difficult conversations at a later date. I know with my children, that's really where the learning happens. Oftentimes is when I come back around a day later or 2 days later and ask, how was that conversation we had going? And a lot can be learned from that. And that's where I like to think that really any breakage that happened in a difficult situation, a difficult communication, can really be mended, and sort of that like, you know, stronger scar tissue gets laid down when two people or a group of people come back together and say, oh yeah, that was tough, but we got through it, and we learned something. So I like to include that in my skills list. We talked about NVC. We're going to finish up here in just another like 1 or 2 minutes. Oh, look at all those emotions. That's a funny, you can find that online. How are you feeling today poster, source Jim Borgman. And that gives some of us who don't have a wide variety of words for how we're feeling, some different words, which can be great. And again, this might, you know, if you are wanting to improve communications with your crew of workers, you might include a resource like this for somebody for a training, or for a group of people for a training, and it's just a fun one. And then finally, just to wrap up, I really believe that communication systems are really worth the effort. And a favorite quote of mine from Annie Dillard, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. So it's never too late to learn some new skills, and I hope you all have enjoyed the webinar, and we're going to open it up to questions now that Bo might need to escape. Oh yeah, there you go. Okay.
Okay, cool. I think I'm gonna switch over to sharing it on my screen.
Okay. So Bo's gonna facilitate some questions. If there are any, you can type them into the chat box. Or if you'd like to bring your voice into this webinar, we welcome that. I'm not quite sure how we do that, but yeah. Bo will figure it out.
So Dave is asking, says, this raised for me a foundational question I didn't really consider before. Does the word apprentice have pretty much universal signal value and communicate a typical arrangement? For example, a learning opportunity in exchange for a lower level of monetary or in-kind compensation? Are there any legal implications in advertising or hiring an apprentice?
Can you talk to the
for sure.
To the
I think I can
the legal or all of it, or I
so I think it varies based on the farm. As far as the legal things, that is very specific to how you are working with that apprentice, and also depends on the labor laws of the state that you are in. And MAFCA doesn't do any advising of the legal relationship. A lot of folks in Maine are by the books treating their apprentice as an employee, because they are doing work on that farm, and they are therefore, by the Department of Labor in Maine, they are considered an employee. I think the term apprentice, by the farmers that are using it here in Maine that are in our program, those are host farms that have really committed to the educational growth of those apprentices. So they're having a relationship beyond just a traditional employer relationship, where they're instilling beginning farmer support and growth, and maybe committing more to explaining everything along the way. So apprentices are exposed to more than maybe an employee that's hired for hourly rate to weed carrots for a week. Do you want to speak? Yeah, how is it different on your farm when you distinguish between the apprentices that you have and the employees that you have?
On our farm, we definitely will do a lot more teaching to apprentices, and that might be bookkeeping, it might be changing the oil on a tractor, things that we would never pay an employee to come in and shadow me in the bookkeeping, or change the grease, change the oil in a tractor, things like that. So we sort of try to give as full a picture of the farm as we possibly can to apprentices, whereas employees we think of in a more traditional sense, that there's a job to do and that we, you know, we're paying them to do that job to a certain standard. Whereas the apprenticeship model is much more about we're really trying to mentor this future farmer and give them as much of a well-rounded experience of our farm as we possibly can.
Thanks. Yeah, and in some circumstances, there is room and board that are part of the support of the farmer that is an apprentice. Oh, and Rachel, thank you for sharing that out. Rachel shared out an awesome Farm Commons, which is a great organization that does legal support regarding to farming, how they are talking about the legal implications of employees and apprentices. Does anyone have any other questions? You can unmute yourself and ask them or tap it into the chat box. Great, so we did want to just provide more information about some of the other resources that we have for apprentice host farms. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen magically.
I did want to say one thing.
Oh, great.
Or ask one thing. Hi, my name's Aaron. I'm in Camden, Maine. I think we've met Polly. I just want to say thank you, Polly. You did a really nice job, really helpful. And I didn't know if the slides would be available by any chance.
Yep, we can make them. We can make them available for sure.
Awesome.
And we'll also make this recording available as well.
Cool. Thank you.
And then any other questions that we have? Okay. So one last thing is that we're able to do these webinars as part of the AgALN network, which is the National Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network. This is hosted by New Entry Sustainable Farming Project down in Massachusetts. And it consists of a network of partner organizations and farms, including MAFCA and the Rogue Farm Corps and Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship and New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. That's working across the country to improve apprenticeship programs. And then on that website also, which is linked here, there are a lot more resources that can directly help with that definition of apprentice and what that looks like for farms. There's a great apprenticeship toolkit that we've been working on. There's previously recorded webinars that can also help with some of those questions, and just a general resource library that you can search. I'm also going to share out an evaluation for this webinar in the chat box and then also in your email. And if you could give us feedback, that would be wonderful. And I think at this point, if there's no more, oh, we do have one more question. Someone is asking about reviews and how you do more formal check-ins.
We do a check-in after 2 weeks on the job. And at that check-in, we that's the end of our trial period. So if it wasn't working out, that would be a time when there was a built-in moment to check in and let somebody know that it wasn't working out. It would never be a surprise. Before that 2-week check-in, we would always be in conversation with that person about what wasn't working out, possibly. And then so at that 2-week check-in, assuming things are going well, we listen to what the apprentices' goals are for the year, and we write those down, and any special learning things that they're seeking. Maybe they want to grow their own garden or want to grow a couple sheep, want to learn to drive the tractor. We record all of those so that when we have a mid-season check-in, we can be accountable for our role and responsibility in delivering those experiences to the apprentice. So we do have a mid-season check-in And our apprenticeships are usually, 7 months or so. So it's usually sometime midsummer. And that's not really considered a review, but it is a built-in opportunity that if there were things that needed to be shared either one way or the other, things that we could improve or that we think the apprentice could improve, that's a built-in time that we have in our communication system. And then at the end of the season, we do ask for an exit interview where we have a list of questions. I don't have them off the top of my brain, but what could we improve? What things went well? So, sort of some basic exit interview questions so that we can learn and that they can learn about how the experience was. So that's sort of our review calendar.
And I'd say as an organization from MAFCA that coordinates host farmers, we send out something very similar to what Polly mentioned, where they have a beginning of the season agreement of what learning style would be best for that apprentice and just general check-ins. And then there's a mid-season check-in and then an end of the season check-in that has pretty standard questions.
If you tune into that next webinar, Julie goes through, she has a lot of handouts actually for farmers that are just excellent that she's developed over the years working with her ranch that are all about how to help apprentices sort of review themselves actually and be accountable to their own skill development, and that's not actually just placed on the farmer to deliver these particular skills, that we as farmers can really help our apprentices and our employees for that matter gain their own sort of like make their own metrics and follow along, make some learning goals and follow those. And we can assist with that and mentor that, but we don't have to consider, that we need to deliver all of those experiences or information. I really like Julie's offerings on that.
Yeah, and she'll definitely be talking about that, how to instill independent learning in your farmer.
Yes.
That's working on your farm. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, just one last call for questions.
Thank you very much for tuning in, and my best to all of you in your farming and communicating endeavors.
Dave has one last question about any advice for those new to these techniques for getting past the body scan that reveals you'd much rather shy away from a tough conversation. Yeah, it's real.
Yes, that's true. It's the body scan gives you a lot of information, and I think like I said at one point, I think acknowledging that it's hard for you to the people around you is a great first step. Acknowledging that it's hard for you to yourself is also a great first step. So no one's expected to be we think of people as either like people or I'm not a people person. But I really like to say that these are skills that really can be learned. They can be practiced if we put a little time and effort into breaking these the skills down and thinking about them one by one. Just like an irrigation system, you wouldn't just say, oh, I know all about irrigation if you've never done it before or thought about it before. You'd have to break it down into component parts and learn about I statements and think about how that feels in you to speak like that, or what is a real apology. So those are the component parts that I tried to break down, and I think you could go with any one of those to learn more as you develop your skills and practice. So.
And I would say it extends beyond the farm too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah. I remember the first time I did a communication workshop with you, I took it home and I was like, to my partner, I was like, great, we're gonna practice nonviolent communication around the dishes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for calling in. There is gonna be an evaluation that is in the chat box. I think Jennifer sent it out, and we'll also send it to you via email, and we encourage you to come to our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day.